Well, I got a special guest, Slyfox. Welcome.
What's up, everyone?
Hey, thanks for joining. You're working from home today, huh?
Yeah, I'm working from home today. I want to say hi to my dog.
Yeah, I may have a cat interluder here. He's walking around. Nero, come over here. You can't hurt a cat, but
Yeah.
you know how that goes. I had a question from Anonymous asking about the hyperparameter optimization I use and the score I optimize for. I kind of touched on this last time. I just use like half of the training data, and I just do a grid search for whichever model I'm using. What do I look for in terms of score? Well, since I've been around a long time, you don't want to have too strong of a signal because you're likely overfitting. And in this correlation environment, I want something close to 4%, no higher than like 4.5. I found that to kind of be a sweet spot, but your mileage may vary. And it also depends on the type of model you're using. You really have to be careful with overfitting. I find that closer to 5 you get, the more you're overfit, and you're not quite in the profitable zone if you're below like 3.8. I've just found that to be true. Other people may have a different experience. But yeah, I fit on like half. I use half the training data and I evaluate on the other half. And then once I feel confident that the model's about right, I'll train on the whole training set to get the exact dialed in parameters. And they don't usually change. Once I have that, I lock in the parameter space and then I add the training data or the validation data. So I do all 132 eras. But now that we have so many accounts, I've also opened that up. So I have clones of my 3 primary models that don't look at validation. So I'm curious to see long-term how they do. What do you notice on your end, Anson? Or Slyfox? What do you want me to call you?
Slyfox works. I'm probably not qualified
to
answer this. I'm actually not qualified to answer this question. Let me summon Mike to see what he says. See if he has time to join. But you guys, I'm actually interested to hear what everyone else is saying.
Yeah, I don't know. Nobody, I think Steppenwolf hopped off. That's okay.
Yeah.
I was just curious if in your internal stuff, if you notice anything different.
Yeah, it's usually
bad cat.
I don't do much of the modeling, actually.
I bet you don't.
Yeah, so I'm not qualified to answer this question.
That's cool. Let's take another one. I'd like to submit again on the past year data to save weeks of validation. Even a little feedback, such as like average rank, would be of great help. Is it nonsense? So I know we get this, every fireside chat, something about looking back, but I think this is a different question because y'all have backtest data. It's possible that you have some gaps where we could predict on something that doesn't exist in the backtest, but is former live data. And it would be like a out of sample validation. I don't know how that would work exactly in practice, but as long as it's not in the backtest data, it is held out data. And I guess we could get some results on it. The problem, like, is it nonsense? The problem would be if those errors that you're looking at in terms of out of sample validation are not like the current regime and you fit to that, you're going to get very bad results.
Right.
And so that's why I don't like that idea, but it's a valid question. So what do you think about that?
So this one I can't answer. So we are actually looking into this right now. I am. So this is something that comes up again and again, but I think right now might be a good time for us to do something like this. The thing I'm investigating right now is whether or not we can release previous live data, live features, and the targets out as like maybe a validation 2 set, precisely to give you guys feedback. And I think what you said about, it being in a different regime and all that stuff is valid. That's why I think we want to take a closer look at it. But I think it's the future.
I don't know how I feel about it all. The tendency to want to overfit to data is really easy to fall into that trap. And the way it is now, we're so blind to everything. There is an element of luck, but with time, you do find some experience with the data. Like I said, how I found a range of correlation scores that I think works.
Right.
But if I had the opportunity to test my model, I don't think I would change anything. So for me, I really don't think it would benefit me. And I don't really see how it could benefit anybody else either. If you build a model that generalizes well, which is the intention,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what y'all desire. I mean, you want us to have stable models. You don't want us changing our parameters every week, right? Because then you can't rely on our back test at all.
Right.
So I don't know. It's a risk.
Yeah, I think it definitely is a risk, but maybe it's like, okay, let's say if this tournament continues like 10 years,
Yeah.
and we now have 10 years worth of live results, do we continue to hide that from you guys, or do we give it out? Yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably worth investigating, which is why we're investigating it now.
Sure.
But yeah, I think the risks that you mentioned are definitely there.
And we've seen it in the tournament, right? Where people have found some way to hyper tune on a specific set of eras.
Right.
By using multiple accounts, they're able to like sniff out which of these were most like current regime, and they'll do really well in the short run.
Right.
But if you were to lock those models in, I think that they would be bottom tercile performers net.
Mm.
And so, like, personally, I don't want to keep modeling. I just want to model once and throw it on compute and forget about it. And I've been able to do that now for, how long has compute been out? We're coming up on a year?
Yeah, maybe about a year, yeah.
Yeah, so, getting my weekends back was amazing. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
4X says he never stops modeling. Well, I mean, more power to you. I don't know. I just don't know. I think there's just risk of overfitting, like I said, and
yeah, I think
treats it like mining GPUs, always churning.
Yeah, I think it's funny that, but I think as long as we keep a period that is truly out of sample, then Numerai can evaluate your true out of sample performance, right?
Yeah.
And I think to us, that's like the thing that matters the most. So even if we do give out some of the live targets as validation to data, or and you can use it to train if you want, we will still be keeping a good chunk of it as test, so that at least we have a good idea of how things are performing out of sample.
Mm-hmm. So that's something I did want to talk about today, was how this extreme volatility in the global stock market is not translating directly into our performance.
Yeah.
So I know I talked to you about this in person.
Yeah.
And I said, you guys were full, you know what? This makes me have to eat crow, because I would have expected some serious problems. And I even brought up burn insurance, although I think it may be unnecessary based on what we're seing now. Very interesting.
It is very interesting. Well, I mean, if this was back in Bernie days, I think we would have problems. But the new Kazuzuki target, as Richard says, actually is much more stable, and we are not that correlated with the overall market. Certainly not just the US. I think we've probably told people before, but the targets are based on global stock market.
That's been out for some time, yes.
Yeah. And even though, sure, the US is a big part of it, but
it would have to be.
It's definitely not limited to the US.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not limited to longs only.
Yep. Nope. We can see that. I mean, the stock market data in general is long biased.
Yeah.
But it's all about how you fit it, right? There's the master key himself, I think.
Yeah. How do we tune hyperparameters?
What is this like in context of as a user?
So do you see my screen share?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first question was, what form of hyperparameter optimization do you use, and what score do you optimize for?
Yeah. So I think we should start with like, what do you optimize for? So the payout is actually based on, like, you're incentivized to use just like maximize mean correlation directly. That's like the, so the current score is, But we do find it useful to optimize for something like a Sharpe ratio, where you take all the means of your, it's like the mean of your error scores divided by the standard deviation of your error scores.
Right.
And it leads to like much better consistency and like lower risk, especially out of sample. So one of those two options is like just really a starting point.
Can you put up some code for that? Because I don't know how to code that up. I'm not a very good coder. I just use the scientific method when I develop my models. But I think it would be beneficial if you had a snippet to like just that optimization piece to throw in a standard model. Even if it was an sklearn custom metric, it'd be very helpful.
Yeah, I'll make sure there's something like that in the like analysis and tips notebook.
Yeah, if anything, that'd be great. I'm sure that would help a lot of people. I probably won't use it because I think my model's pretty good. But if people started beating me and they were doing it, yeah, I'd probably make a switch. But that'd be helpful. So that was what the question was. I said what I do is I look for a correlation score of about 3.8 to 4.4 in that range. I found that that's pretty performant. Anything over 4.5-ish is usually too overfit. Anything below 3.8 I find isn't very performant. That was one thing that I said. And then I also mentioned that I use half the training data at first to find the parameters that work for a given model, evaluate on the other half. And if I feel okay with it, then I'll fit it on the full training set, evaluate on validation. And if I still like it, I'll lock it in and I'll put all of it in, all 1 through 132.
Yeah, that is very good. Like, so talking about like your 3.8 to 4.4 range, like sort of a scientific way to test for if you're overfitting is like doing that, the two halves, like you said, and sort of like checking if, so you're saying you're out of, some of your out of sample performance can get like above 4.4?
Yeah, I found that if it does, then I've overfit.
Gotcha.
And that'll show up in the volatility of my model. Like for instance, there was a time, oh boy, might have been about a year ago, where I didn't realize that I was overfit, but my volatility was very high. And when we switched over to correlation, it showed up and I was at about a 4.5, 4.6 correlation score in the validation data. And I backed off on some parameters. I reran everything to kind of double check. And I fell down to like 4.2, 4.3, and it cleaned it up. And that's the settings I have now. And so I'm doing very well in that range. Now, of course, that could all be spurious, right? It may not just be the correlation because the features matter a lot too.
You know, I mean, it's definitely something to consider. Like, if you read like Marx's book, the fear is, even if you're doing everything right, like doing your cross validation correctly, and you're doing everything scientifically, if you end up with a score that's just like way too high, it is like a sign that you can still have like these kind of false discoveries, even if you're doing everything else correctly. So, yeah. Yeah,
that definitely happens. So that's I think that's why Slyfox pinged you to come in and talk a little bit about that. And I know that you've mentioned in chat that your model is a neural network, and that's why you're different. And then there's a large group of users who clearly are using tree-based models. Have you noticed anything now that you have a little more time kind of looking at the data and the users? Is there any other interesting trends that you've noticed?
So yeah, I mean, I was kind of interested in the meta model contribution, like effects that they've like after announcing that, how people have been changing their models. So like in the first week or two, I saw like people were changing their models. It seemed like they were trying to get away from these tree-based approaches, but lately it's been more like converging on integration test type models.
Yeah.
Because MMC is sort of encouraging that. So I think there's going to be like this short term where it is more correct to go to these like more safe models and get everybody doing something that is just good, and kind of MMC will discourage just these like bad models,
right?
More directly. And then once everybody's converged on like the easy approach, then it'll like open up. It'll start being more profitable to start diverging from that and coming up with like more creative things. Yeah. So yeah, that's the main thing I've been monitoring, is just like how people are going to respond to meta model contribution and multiple accounts and things like this, and see if we're going to get a lot more diversity or not.
Yeah, I think it'll happen because like I don't want people falling into whatever solution I've come into because it'll ruin my MMC. But also, if people start to beat me, I'm going to lose my rank. So I'm incentivized in some way to do a bit of both, improve my performance and find the diversity of solutions per se. So I am interested to see how that goes. So the last question from Slido, and then we can just chat, was from SSH. Any thoughts about optimizing feature exposure metrics? Well, I mean, we kind of touched on that a little bit. I would be concerned about overfitting on accident. And I feel like if you take Richard's advice about treating the errors properly and not oversampling the data, then you can kind of control for that automatically. But I haven't seen anybody who doesn't have like a 0.08, what you call an 8% exposure. I haven't seen anybody who's much lower than that and is doing extremely well. So
we have seen, I will say that feature exposure, like the reason it's included is because we've seen like through research that's very indicative of models that perform very well on the leaderboard. Like there's a very strong correlation between having low feature exposure and high performance on the leaderboard. Now it's not for free. You can't just post something that has 0 feature exposure and have good performance. Obviously, it has to be in the right direction and everything. But yeah, it kind of tells us that the models are looking at something like a lot deeper than just like linear exposures. So,
right.
And they're just more robust, and yeah, they just continue on for like longer periods of time and don't degrade as much. So it is a very important metric to look at. And if you have different models that are close in performance, if one of them is significantly lower feature exposure, then you might want to consider using that one for where you put all your money, because there's a lot less risk there.
One thing I'm interested, I don't have time to do it, so that's why I'm willing to talk about it, but there are groups of features. And I'd be interested to see somebody build an ensemble where they only use one group per model. So the ensemble is like 6 different models, each per era, or per group of features, and then fit a meta model on top of that and see how that does. I haven't ever tried it because I think it'll just overfit, but it would be very interesting to see how it performs. Something to think about.
Yeah, I would love to. I know Lack of Intelligence, he recently said his namesake comes from not using any of the intelligence features. That was like really crazy to me. It's a really cool idea. Those are grouped for a reason, like all the intelligence features, and they're not just all randomly named things. Like they are actual groups of features. They're related. So something to think about is like kind of looking at your feature exposures like within those groups directly, like just limiting exposures to intelligence or exposures to charisma or whatever it is, rather than like individual feature exposures. It's something I haven't even played with, but it is an idea that kind of goes along with what you're saying. There are some interesting things that can be done in that area. Yeah,
even Richard told me that when I was in town last. He was saying that it would be interesting to see users like just completely ignore a set of features. And if it was still very performant, it would be unique.
Yeah.
Just by the mere fact that it's not looking at all those other features. And so he hypothesized a long time ago that models that do that and are performant would be very useful to the fund. And so MMC is definitely one of those programs to move in that direction. I want to know, how's MMC coming along?
Anson, do you have any updates on MMC progress?
The punt. The punt.
I think MMC, right now, we're still in the phase of analyzing how people are reacting to it.
Yeah.
And we're still doing internal research. We're working on designing a payout system for it, but we don't want to rush it.
Yeah.
Maybe just because the last few times we introduced changes to the payout system, there's always been like backlash. So we want to do it right, and we don't mind taking it slow. I think, as you've seen in the few recent changes that we've done, we've kind of taken like this approach where we want to do the minimum amount of changes to give we want to do maybe like a 20% change to get 80% of the effects. So For example, it would be like releasing the MMC score, but not doing the payouts, which I think is enough to actually, get everyone thinking about this in the right way. Similarly, with the multiple account system, we're like, okay, I'm just going to loosen the rule before actually shipping the feature, so that we can get most of the benefit before we actually have to do the change, because we know that every change is disruptive.
Definitely.
Yeah. So in short, we're definitely doing it, but it's not going to be super. It's not going to be soon. It's not going to be in the next 2 weeks. Let me tell you that.
Hello, SSH.
Hello, SSH.
You can unmute yourself if you like, or I can do it for you. There you go.
Hi, guys.
Hello, welcome.
Decided to share my vision now while listening you insights.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So on MMC, I agree. Please don't rush anything, especially when it comes to payout and profitability. Glad to hear you're taking your time on it.
Yeah.
I'm a proponent of a slow move, especially when it comes to modeling and staking and whatnot. I know one of the things that Michael was talking about in terms of priority list was to move the multi-account to one account thing.
Yeah.
I don't even know what to call it. What are you guys calling it internally?
My marketing name for it is single account multiple models.
SAMM.
SAMM.
SAMM. Okay.
Yeah. So Patrick, who I think some of you guys may have worked with a lot of like login security stuff, he's taking the lead on that, and we're making good progress. So from what I can tell, it seems like people are making a lot of new accounts. I can imagine how annoying it would be, especially if you have MFA enabled on it and with all the IP verification, stuff like that. So we're working hard, both me and Patrick, that's our top priority right now, is to get that shipped so that you guys can actually manage multiple models without going crazy.
Yeah, I think this is really important too. It's almost like, I kind of overlooked this at first, but I think it's sort of a prerequisite for real MMC.
Yeah.
Like having the ability to experiment with these different models without having to actually put stake in it yet, but still getting MMC scores and seeing how correlated it is with the meta model. I think is gonna kind of work in conjunction with MMC to just make a much better like environment and place for iteration. So that's kind of why that's a big part of why I got kind of prioritized ahead of MMC right now.
No, it makes sense. I would agree. It's pretty important because flipping through all my accounts is a bit daunting, especially moving Numerai across to stake. That's a pain in the neck, but it always has been. So like, that's not new. I do actually have a feature suggestion related to this one account or SAMM.
Go for it.
So I have 3 mains, 3 alts. So I have 6 accounts.
Okay.
I simply don't have time to develop more than that. I just don't. But I thought about it and I was like, wow, you know what would be cool is if I could just use a slide bar, create a new account, and weight different combinations of my models, like right in the system. Like, because you've got both of my submissions. Let's say I have 2 accounts. You've got both of them. And I want to create a 3rd account. So I picked those 2 and I was like, weight this one 30%, the other 70%. You have my submissions, so you can just do that.
Yeah.
Right? And all it does is just take the weights of the submissions as a new account by itself. And so then if you think about that, if you extrapolate that a little bit, if I had 5 unique accounts, I could create a 6th that's some kind of weighted system of that.
Yeah.
And then I don't have to do it myself. I don't know what it would look like on your back end, but you would definitely get, that's like a low friction thing from a user perspective to kind of boost.
Yeah. I thought about that and I actually proposed that before, but so this is Richard's response. He's like, as a data scientist, like I wouldn't trust you to blend my prediction. I would make sure that I'm blending it correctly myself before I submit it to you. Cause like, how do I know that you're doing it correctly? But I agree. I think it would be a fun feature to have maybe in the future. I think right now our focus is just solving the most basic case, which is not having you guys have to log in and out.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is right now. I do like the multi-factor, but I don't know if I like multi-factor 10 times.
Yeah, me too.
But controlling my account and having that security is pretty important. So I did like that addition. Gosh, when did MFA come out? That was like 2 years ago.
That was before my time, before
Yeah, had to
2017.
have been.
Yeah.
The increase in the data set. So what's the next step after that? So we have a lot more of the tournament data. Train data hasn't changed though. When do you think that's going to flip?
Yeah, so as I said just now, Michael, I sort of revealed that we're looking into giving away validation 2.
Okay.
I think that's the thing that we're looking at next, which is giving you guys more validation data that you could maybe train on if you want to.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to change anything. Like I said, it would. The only thing that would make me change is if suddenly I became not so performant. That would be the incentive for me to do something. Right now, I'm looking pretty good.
You can use it just to validate, I guess. You don't have to retrain.
Well, if we met. I already do it, so yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the next biggest thing that we're looking at internally. Obviously, we're also keeping an eye out on the ever-growing test set, making sure that doesn't push people past memory limits and all that stuff. I think if and when we actually get there, to me, the thing we should probably do is to start looking into different file formats. So something like maybe HD5 or Parquet. I know Pandas, at least a lot of the Python tooling supports this natively. It would just make everything faster, cheaper. So those are 2 things on my mind.
I would just ask that you don't do anything that breaks compute.
Yeah.
Because I even encountered it myself. I made the walkthrough video for compute. You'd think I'd remember this stuff, but I hadn't used it in a while, and I had to redeploy, and I had to look through the docs again because I forgot. So, you know, that would be my suggestion, is just do everything you can to not make me have to redeploy.
Yeah.
I mean, it was easy. Like, it was just, oh crap, like that was ridiculously easy. I can't believe I forgot, but I still had to think about it and chew on it a while, make sure I didn't break anything.
Yeah. One thing I do want to do also is to improve compute so that we can do better, maybe like managed upgrades. So I know we don't own the infrastructure, but maybe you can opt into us pushing out small updates.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, Richard told me when I was there last, he said that it's possible that they could just add a new feature group, but it doesn't mean we'd have to change our models at all.
Right, exactly.
Choose to use it or not. And that kind of change, I like a lot because it doesn't impact my workflow. I mean, I'd have to check my code to make sure I'm not using any kind of like blanket data grab, like values. You know, if I did that, that could be dangerous. But as long as I code it in a way that I only select the features I want, and I think that'd be fine.
Yeah.
Well, I only have a couple minutes left. I don't see any questions in chat. So if there's nothing else, I can call it a day and let everybody go back to work. Thanks for logging in, everybody. Have a great week. And thanks for joining, Michael.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you.